Thank you for joining Wars of the Rosies as we continue with part 15, The Secret Doctrine in the Second Degree, from the Lost Word, Its Hidden Meaning, by George H. Steinmetz. Chapter 14, The Secret Doctrine in the Second Degree. This is the cyclical degree of Freemasonry. It follows the material degree of entered apprentice and depicts the self-conscious being evolved from his previous state of simple consciousness. Heretofore guided by instinct, he will now be guided by reason. It is the counterpart of the biblical allegory of Isaac. He who meditated, like Isaac, the fellow craft must meditate upon the problems presented for his consideration in this degree. He must analyze, weigh, and interpret them for himself, and his final conclusions will have the all-determining effect upon his future success. It is in this degree that the intellectual foundation is laid for the understanding of the spiritual degree which is to follow. Upon the integrity of this foundation, upon his grasp of the symbolism and allegory here presented for his inspection, rests his spiritual superstructure. It is well enough to speak of blind faith, and it is true that in a few rare instances, some have attained to spiritual illumination by faith alone. Yet it must be remembered that this is the winding road, not that straight path to mastership. The fellow craft does not depend nor wait on evolution. He accepts the admonition of that ancient Mason, St. Paul, to prove all things, hold fast that which is good. 1 Thessalonians 5:21. We have every right to expect outcropping of the secret doctrine in the second degree. In fact, to a far greater extent than in the first. Nor shall we be disappointed. However, we must not expect these allusions to be as direct or as pointed in their implications as in the third. We may expect and shall encounter speculation of a spiritual nature. We shall not, due to the very nature of the degree, be operating. One does not adopt the same approach to the cyclical as to the material. The fellow craft advances by a different step. Through symbology, he is shown that he has progressed, and the same symbology concurrently points out to him that he must progress further, although the measure of that progress is not necessarily indicated. The preparation assumes significance when it is recalled that the ancients taught the left side of man to be the weaker, while the right was the stronger and more important. Naturally, the material is of less consequence in the life of man than his cyclical existence. Even the working tools of the degree veil subtle implication, aside from their explained symbolism. Correctly speaking, they are not tools, but instruments. A plumb, level, or square is not actually used in building in the manner that a gavel, trowel, or setting maul is used as a tool. The former are instruments of precision with which to measure, to determine the correctness of work already accomplished. The level proves the levels of horizontals in relation to the surrounding earth surface. The plumb indicates the true perpendicular by recourse to the known law of gravity. The square will substitute these findings as they relate one to another, and will produce the desired angles for the workmen at the joining of walls, etc. The place of meeting is changed. No longer the ground floor, symbolic of the material. The fellow craft meets in the middle chamber, that plane between the material and the spiritual, the cyclical realm. Likewise, he operates on the level of self-consciousness, between simple consciousness from which he has evolved and cosmic consciousness, to which he aspires. On the way to the middle chamber, one must first pass between the two columns, immutably signifying whenever encountered, free will and universal law. No one can approach the middle chamber except of his own free will and accord, and he cannot enter except in accordance with universal law. The 3 steps are mounted, whatever they may signify at other times. Here they inform of the threefold composition of the complete man, body, soul, and spirit, primarily, and secondly to the 3 planes of consciousness, peculiar to these 3 planes of being. The aspirant then ascends the 5 steps, representative, it is said, of the 5 human senses and the 5 orders of architecture. Note carefully the emphasis of the importance of but 3. Only 3 orders of architecture are admittedly original, the other 2 being combinations of the 3, and they, having nothing but what is borrowed, and differ only accidentally. It is significant that the 3 senses, deemed the most important, are those by which the vast majority of impressions are conveyed to the mind. It is evident that upon the plane of simple consciousness, the individual must depend entirely upon these senses for his impressions of the material world, and to a large degree this is true of the self-conscious. Thus, mounting the 5 steps is symbolic of getting above, of reaching a level where this dependence no longer exists. The necessity of rising, of getting above the physical senses, is apparent if we but reflect on how they mislead the intellect. How true is that old saying of the skeptic, believe none of what you hear and only half of what you see. The sense of sight informs us that the sun rises in the east, passing through that inverted bowl they call the sky, sets in the west. Science informs and proves the earth rotates on its own axis, and this apparent movement of the sun is an optical illusion. Sight makes 2 parallel rails meet in the distance, but the wise man will not start walking to this meeting place. He knows the eye deceiveth. In the 7 steps, we see a varied symbology. They are the 7 liberal arts and sciences in the ritual. Outside the ritual, they are the 7 creative cycles, the 7 Elohim, creative agencies or attributes of the Hebrew theology, and the 7 planets through which the soul descends to take up its incarnation. In the application to the scientific ideology of the 2nd degree, we discover them to be the 7 bodies of the complete man, 3 of which are spiritual and 4 material. We have discussed the composition of the 3 lodges and learned that 5, 3 masters and 2 fellow craft, compose a lodge of fellow craft. This exemplifies the discarding of the 2 lowest material bodies, and portrays the physical man composed of but 2 material bodies and 3 spiritual bodies. Likewise, it is symbolical of the senses and orders of architecture, where 3 are deemed of importance and 2 are negligible. Study of the 7 liberal arts and sciences is recommended to the fellow craft. In ancient days, when this phrase was originated, a knowledge of these 7 sciences or arts represented a liberal education, for they were all the knowledge extant. It follows that one conversant with the sciences enumerated was of the intellectual elite. The degree of fellow craft is intended to develop the intellect to that fine point of discrimination where it can analyze for itself, separate the wheat from the chaff, and accept or reject the impressions of the physical, material world about us. When this has been achieved, when the self-conscious individual has developed and utilized the talents which self-consciousness has bestowed upon him, then and only then is he duly and truly prepared to begin his real journey to travel in foreign countries. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. And if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Rosies. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. thank you so very much.